Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello everybody, welcome to our Wednesday Leading Change episode this week with John Albrecht. Hi John, welcome back.
Hi Vasco, thank you again.
So John, on Wednesdays we want to dive into a topic that is very often a big part of being a Scrum Master, working with change. Now it could be a personal change, team level, or even organizational level change, like the good old Prince 2 transformations you were referring to earlier in the week. So walk us through one of those stories that you have to share, and especially put some focus on the tools, the tips, the tricks, the techniques about change management, change leadership you learned back then that you still apply today.
I think every role you work in, everything you do is about change, but I don't necessarily realize or don't necessarily sort of see it as change. Maybe it's a nod back to that Prince 2 transformation. I'm a software developer at heart, and I believe in evolutionary, one step forwards, making small increments. And that's what change is about. It's making improvements. But it's not done to people, it's done with consent. The story around change, this is one I would like to tell, is around a startup I was working with. Going in there was just all sorts of things going on, just like a team given an impossible deadline to achieve the impossible by a certain date, and lots of people doing lots of things to do that, and no visible or very little visible sort of coherence around the work.
What do you mean by coherence?
People doing different things in different ways, in different directions, people not swimming in the same direction or kind of understanding the direction they need to swim in together. So So they were working like separately and perhaps not coordinating their own work. 60 people, 40 proof of concepts, just random people doing random things. And that kind of environment is an environment where you learn what you need to do. I'd had a lot of experience working with teams, but going into that environment sort of helped me learn what leadership was and what leadership is. And by that, I mean, it's courage and respect, or the courage and respect of leadership and the courage to do what needs to be done in this situation. And I think when you're entering an environment where it is all over the place, it does take an awful lot of courage to stand up and lead through others and help others find that clarity. The main tools were leadership skills. So again, personal skills. But we tried every trick in the book. We were drawing things on walls. We were story mapping. We were just trying to pin where we need to get to. And we managed to find a route forwards, an MVP forwards, to achieve what needed to be achieved by a date. And we sprinted through that work, but working with 50 or 60 people and building those leadership skills whilst doing that was my learning at the time. And the change happens through people, and you can lead quite a large change if you're authentic with yourself and you listen and you believe in folks and you make it visible and you do Scrum well. But in that sense, you create a process, not in the process sense, you kind of process that works for folks, that works for them, and you adapt that process as folks need. And then that change can happen. And then that change can happen in your organization. That part of the startup, those 60 people, that becomes sort of a thing that others see. And then you're working with other teams, you're working wider. But again, it kind of comes back to being honest with yourself, but having the courage to step forwards and listening. It's really amorphic, Vasco. I can't really describe that. I don't know whether I've answered the question. I find this question really tricky.
Well, so there's a couple of things I would like to highlight and get perhaps a little bit more detail from you. So you got into an organization, into what I can only guess felt like chaos.
Yes.
And then you started to see, okay, so where are these people? What are maybe their beliefs and what are the conflicting beliefs they have? And you found that at least the common goal was missing. So
Yes.
that's what I understood, that you were working with the teams to try to, you called it pin down what was supposed to be delivered, the MVP as you called it, but I'm guessing that meant like getting a shared understanding and acceptance of what it might mean, right? Because
Yes.
if there's 40 proof of concepts, it's definitely fuzzy enough for it not to have been defined at all to start with.
Yes. What was defined is we need to do this by this date in a few months' time, but that date wasn't possible. Yes, we pinned down what was possible in that time at a team by team, but across the startup itself. And it's really amorphic, man. It's just making it visible. It's just making different folks' thoughts and views visible, and then working towards a goal, working towards a thing that is achievable, that we agree as a group is achievable, and then delivering that small slice of functionality so it can be used and it can be shown that it works, and then building on top of that.
And I'm guessing that exactly that was also one of the, you called it leadership skills, but that was one of the tools that you were also focusing on, right? Like getting them to a point where they feel they can deliver something. So first defining the goal, obviously, and a goal they believe in, but also like small improvements, small changes, small deliverables that started to grow even further that belief that the final shared objective was possible, right?
So I think in a startup, in that kind of startup, there are startups and startups, yeah, but in that kind of organization, the smallest delivery, the smallest bit of value isn't, and it's the case with more organization actually, the smallest possible thing that delivers value to the customer is much smaller than you can imagine.
Oh yeah, that only an XPer would say that, right? That this is one of the things that I like about the roots of XP is that it really came from teams that were struggling, and of course they had to figure out how to overcome that struggle to deliver. And you said what you said, the smallest possible thing that could deliver value is often much smaller than people imagine.
It's much smaller. So if you think about the work that you're doing, or you think if any team thinks about the work they're doing, or they think of this elephant that they think they have to deliver. I have to deliver this elephant. It's like, oh my gosh, it's an elephant. But the smallest possible thing might be, it's so small. It could be like a drawing of a toenail of an elephant. It could be just absolutely tiny. And if you're doing something,
or it could be an ant, right?
Yeah.
Like if we go with the iterative and incremental approach, could be an ant.
Could be. And in a software sense, if we're delivering something, we want to put something in hands. If you're trying to deliver something, what's and this isn't very agile, but it's a bit XP, but this small slice, it could be a website, it could be a totally empty website, it could just be an email.
Exactly.
It's something. It could even be not software.
Could be a PDF, right? Like I remember working with a client where they were struggling with producing a digital report, and I asked them, why don't you just email them a PDF?
And no software. Can we do this without software? Can we just do this with people sending emails out pretending to be software? So you can go beyond.
This is really the intersection of XP and NoEstimates, by the way. Yeah. So I'm really liking this conversation.
Yeah, and it also hooks into GV design sprints, which we weren't doing at this organization. Done it since, but if you want to test out a hypothesis, you don't need as much as you think you do. You can get something. You can validate something to validate someone's behavior and check whether it is what you think it is, to make an adjustment with very, very little. In Agile sense, we talk about kind of Agile Manifesto, it's about delivering software. But I think if you go to GV design sprints and you go to if you really home it back, you don't need software to do many of these things. You can sort of validate without the software.
Absolutely. And very often that's much faster and easier to do.
Oh gosh, yeah. Yes. And then you've saved a whole load of effort because you're really boiling into what is valuable. And when you're working in organizations where it's not clear, it becomes, and it's the XP spirit, isn't it, a bit? But it becomes imperative to really understand where the value is. When I was working in a lean manufacturing organization, another startup, the kind of, not this startup, to be really, really clear, the CEO at the time would say, to understand value, you need to understand waste, because they're kind of one side of the other side of the coin. Waste is the stuff around the value. We need to not do things. What can we not do? What can we remove? What things can we not do? By removing all of those things, do you need to do that? Yeah, do we need to do this? Why are we doing this? Are we sure we need to do this? You'll be surprised. You'll be surprised how small the valuable thing is. And I'll give another analogy, again, from that organization. Vasco, why do you buy a digger? If you wanted to buy a digger, why are you buying diggers? If you're in the market for buying a digger, do you want diggers?
Probably I want to build a house or something.
You probably want to build a house. You might want to dig a hole. You don't want the digger. The digger is waste.
And everybody knows that instinctively, because if you've ever done some home improvement, you will find yourself with loads of tools you have no use for after that.
You don't want the tools. You don't want the tools. Customers don't want software. They want different behaviors. They want magical outcomes. They want customers to do things. They want...
And that is so controversial to say, though. I mean, I totally agree with it. Customers that buy software don't want software. They want a problem solved or a cost reduced or a revenue increased or whatever.
They want a different goal. And if they can get that goal without the software, then why have the software? There's no point in building it.
Bingo. And also, it's a lot cheaper for us to provide a solution that does not require software to be maintained, for the next 10 or 20 years. That costs loads of money.
A huge tail of support with software. So yeah, no software.
Code is a liability.
Yeah.
Whoa, we're getting really, really deep into the NoEstimates and extreme programming conversation here. This is lovely.
But I think that kind of culture, and it can go the wrong way as well. But that kind of where there's not much, and you've got to do something by a silly date, drives that thinking. It drives other thinking as well. It drives technical debt. It drives all sorts of stuff. But I think it also drives leadership skills, and it drives people to think about the stuff. And yeah, that's my journey of sort of organizational change. But you do it by slowing it down. You do it by boiling down the value to the smallest possible thing of value. You do it with folks, and you do it by having courage and knowing you can do what you can do, and knowing it's through other people, and being a leader. And yeah, up until that point, I was a leader. I was working with teams and organizations, but in that mode, I felt like I really was a leader, and I learned much more about myself during that time.
Absolutely. Great story. Thank you for sharing that, John.
No, thank you. And yeah, it's a really tough question, Vasco, because of that point at the start. I think we're all involved in it, but it's a difficult question to answer.
Leading change is one of the core skills we must acquire, but it is only one of the steps towards our success as Scrum Masters. Tomorrow, on Success Thursday, we will talk about how to define success for the Scrum Master role. We'll cover tips on how to measure your way to that position, and most importantly, how to develop that focus on continuous improvement that is as important for Scrum Masters as it is for teams. See you tomorrow. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.